Welcome. Our next unit is going to cover the endocrine system, which deals with hormones that help control and regulate how our body functions. We're going to be doing these notes a little bit differently today, in that you're going to be taking your notes while you view this presentation. As we transition from one slide to the next, I'm going to pause in my speaking briefly to give you an opportunity to fill in the information on the screen so that you can focus on the discussion as well. So, let's get going. Okay, the endocrine system. It is called the second great controlling system of the body, the first being the nervous system. We know the nervous system, nerves, neurons, our brain, spinal cord. They definitely control what we do. They process a lot of things, and they cause us to react. So all of our five senses, they connect to our nervous system, hence that is a controlling system. But the endocrine system is as well. It controls largely how our body actually operates. And it does this using chemicals which are known as hormones. You are maybe familiar with hormones, especially during times of puberty, when you hit your growth spurt. Well, what actually is causing you to grow so quickly, like 7 inches in 6 months, is a hormone known as growth hormone. And if that hormone is present, you grow really, really quickly. And if that hormone is not present or present in limited quantities, you don't grow so much. So how tall you get definitely depends on that hormone. Well, there's other hormones that control most other bodily processes as well, as we're going to come to find out. Endocrinology is what the study of these hormones is called. So people who study hormones and problems with them and the glands that secrete them, they're all tied to this practice. You will find this image roughly on the third page of your handouts. So I'm going to stop speaking to give you a chance to pause this, go to that image, and fill in these different glands tied to the endocrine system. Okay, let's take a quick look at these and their locations, and then we're going to discuss each of these glands and the hormones that they secrete shortly here. So to start with, we have the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. All of those are located in our brain. We spoke previously of the hypothalamus on top of the brainstem. The pituitary gland is directly beneath the hypothalamus. And as you'll come to find out, the functions of the pituitary gland are largely controlled by the hypothalamus. There's the thyroid gland and the parathyroid glands. Those are both located in your neck region. There's the thymus gland, which is only functional in children. It stops working at about age 5. That's located in our chest region. We have the adrenal glands. Those are on top of the kidneys. The kidneys are not actually an endocrine organ. They're in this picture to illustrate the location of the adrenal glands, which is on top of them. The pancreas, which is near the stomach. Ovaries, and testes, depending on gender. Okay, back to our discussion. Hormones, as discussed a short while ago, they're chemical substances. They're produced by glands or secreted by glands, and they travel through our body largely using blood. There's other extracellular fluids, like the lymphatic system, that hormones can travel through as well, but largely in our blood. So hormones, they'll be released from one tissue or gland or an organ that has endocrine cells. It will go into the fluids of our body, and then it will travel to some other part of the body. To give you an example of exactly what I'm kind of meaning here, we talked previously of the pituitary gland. It's located in the brain. The pituitary gland is the gland that secretes growth hormone, which we spoke of just a short while ago, growth hormone hops into the bloodstream, travels through the bloodstream to the long bones of our body, namely our femurs, causes the femurs to get larger at the epiphyseal line, or epiphyseal plate, and then once we've ended puberty, that epiphyseal line turns into an epiphyseal plate, and growth has stopped. But that growth, it is directly regulated by growth hormone, which goes all the way back up to our brain, the pituitary gland. So it does regulate the metabolic activity of other cells. In this case, the metabolic activity of long bones in the body are controlled by growth hormone. There are two classifications of growth of hormones. Hormones can either be amino acid in nature or a steroid. So steroids, we're going to be talking about those. Yes, you do have some in your body. No, they're not all bad. Okay. Amino acid hormones include proteins. You probably know that proteins are already made up of amino acids. Peptides and amines, which are individual amino acids. They're parts of an amino acid. The steroid classification of a hormone would be things like cholesterol, and then sex hormones, which would be like testosterone, androgen, estrogen. Those are examples of sex hormones. And the last form of a hormone, which we haven't quite covered, a third form of a hormone, which I hadn't mentioned until now, are known as prostaglandins, which are hormones that are formed from the cell membrane of cells. Talking about hormones and what they do and where they go. Okay. Each hormone is produced from a cell, or an organ, or a gland. It just kind of depends. Once that hormone is released or secreted, it travels to a specific place in the body. That specific place is called a target or target cell, which very often is an organ. The example we spoke of previously was the hormone growth hormone produced from the pituitary gland. Growth hormone's target cell would be the long bones of the body. That is the only place in the body growth hormone will actually react with. So it is very, very highly specific as to what part of the body it will affect. Other hormones will go to specific places, and they will only cause a reaction in that specific place as well. So, what will happen once a hormone reaches its destination, its target cell? Several things can happen. It just kind of depends on the specific point in time and the reason why the hormone was released. One such thing that can happen is the cell membrane or plasma membrane of that target organ or cell can change. And it can change to allow things to pass through, or change in a way that prevents things from passing through. So it's kind of like causing the cell membrane doorway, if you will, to open or close. Another thing a hormone can do is cause proteins to be made or synthesized. It can cause enzymes to be turned on or turned off. It can cause a cell to go to the different stages of mitosis. And it can also cause that target cell to secrete other things. And that's kind of the case with the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus secretes a hormone. That hormone goes to the pituitary gland. That causes the pituitary gland to secrete another hormone. Kind of like a chain reaction. For this slide, I'm actually going to look at the picture on the next page of your handout. So if you turn to the next page, I'm going to explain this. Looking at that picture will help you kind of understand what all of this is saying as we look at the picture. The picture looks something like this. Now, to explain what's going on here, we need to do a little bit of background biology. First off, what we need to know about biology. Now, in order to understand what's going on in this picture, we need to know a little bit about biology, specifically DNA. If you ask the typical person what DNA does, they will probably give a response along the lines of it controls everything about you, which is partially true but not entirely true. The most correct answer is what controls everything about you? Proteins. Hair color, eye color, shape of your nose, how your body functions, all controlled by proteins. Now, proteins are actually made from DNA. How it works is DNA undergoes a process known as transcription and translation, which ultimately produce a different type of DNA known as RNA. It's an altered form of DNA. RNA then goes out to the ribosomes of cells, and ribosomes, if you recall what those organelles do, they make proteins. So the protein then would be made, and it would do whatever its job is. So let's tie this whole picture back together, going back to gene activation. Direct gene activation works as follows. A hormone goes to a cell, its target, and it crosses this cell membrane. It does that through a process called diffusion. Once inside the cell, the hormone goes into the nucleus, and it binds to a receptor protein. Once the hormone has stuck to the receptor protein becomes active. Its job is to go to the DNA strand and cause this mRNA to be created. Once the mRNA is created, it leaves the nucleus, goes back out into the cytoplasm where the ribosomes are at, and creates a protein. So in essence, with direct gene activation, this hormone is causing this protein to be made. And the example of direct gene activation, what type of hormones are they? They are steroids, which would be our sex hormones. So testosterone, androgen, estrogen, progesterone, to name a few. The last item we're going to talk about in this presentation, or this section of it I should say, is the second messenger system. It's called the second messenger system because these hormones cannot go directly through the cell membrane or plasma membrane of cells. In direct gene, they cross the cell membrane directly. With second messenger systems, the hormones cannot, so they need something to kind of help them along their way. Like the last one, we're going to look at this picture, which is in your handout, to kind of see a visual of what's going on while we look at this information down here. But before we get into how that actually happens, the key word we need to know about in this one, going back to biology once again, is enzyme. Enzymes are things that cause a metabolic reaction to occur with less energy. So if something requires too much energy to be done, nothing will happen. So if we decrease the amount of energy needed, the work can be done. And that's exactly what enzymes do. They decrease the amount of energy needed for something to happen. Consider yourself trying to push a big boulder up a hill. Well, what could make that easier? Taking a big shovel to make the hill lower. That shovel would represent an enzyme. It's decreasing the amount of effort and energy you would need to push on that rock to make it go up the hill. So how a second messenger system works is as follows. A hormone, a non-steroid one, will bind to a membrane receptor. It does not cross directly through. It binds to a membrane receptor. This then triggers an enzyme to produce what is known as a second messenger. In this one, the name of the second messenger is cyclic AMP. As a result, the function of the cell changes and the effects of the hormone can be produced, such as breaking down glycogen, as we see on our screen here. So that would be a response.